Okay, can everybody hear me okay? Grand. First hurdle passed. So yeah, thank you very much for inviting me here today. I head up the Tobacco, Vaping, Gambling, Diet and Healthy Weight Unit in Scottish Government. And I've had the pleasure of leading this diverse policy area for over 3 years now. And even in that time, there's been a lot of changes to the work we do. And before I start, I'd like to acknowledge that yesterday was No Smoking Day, a day that is dedicated to raising awareness of the harms of tobacco. And I know it's also Ash Scotland's 50th anniversary year, and they're asking for people to share their story. I've never smoked, but I come from a family of smokers. Of many of us here probably do. I remember sitting on the floor of the living room on a Saturday night with a cloud of blue smoke swirling around my head as the family got together, and I have a big family. I remember how this affected my breathing. I also know what it's like to lose a nan to COPD and to a grandfather suddenly to throat cancer, both caused by smoking. Tobacco contributes significantly to Scotland's unfair and unjust health inequalities as both a cause and effect. As many of you know, we have the 2034 target to reduce smoking rates to 5% or less. So this date was set initially from the 2013 tobacco strategy. A child born in 2013 would be 21 in 2034. The ambition that there would be in a tobacco-free Scotland. It's an ambition I'm determined to help support making a reality. However, there's a long way to go, and 2034 is only a decade away. I can't quite believe it's only a decade away. So the latest Scottish Health Survey data can be used to forward forecast, if current trends remain stable, smoking levels in 2034. Note obviously that the 2021 figures included here, but due to COVID, they're likely an underestimate of prevalence. And the red line at the bottom shows the 5% target. And it shows without further interventions, we're likely to miss the 5% target in both males and females. And this can be seen even more starkly when looking at the trend lines by deprivation. And I know this will be of direct interest to the topic today, given the focus on inequalities. Only in the least deprived areas where deprivation is calculated using the Scottish Index of Multiple Deprivation are we on track to meet the 2034 targets. And interestingly, in these areas we have almost hit, I'll say, the 2034 target. However, it becomes very stark when you look at the most deprived areas. Individuals in these areas will typically earn less, suffer the cumulative effects of health more than individuals in the least deprived areas. By 2034, using this simplistic forecasting method, and I will emphasise it's a simplistic forecasting method, smoking rates could be around 15 or 16%, much higher than our 5% target in Scotland. And that's why we need to do more. However, unlike in 2018, when the previous plan was published, we now have an additional aspect to consider within tobacco policy. This is the growing impact of nicotine vapour products, which I'll just refer to as vapes going forward. So the Scottish Government position on these devices are they're one of a potential cessation devices that can support smoking cessation. However, they are not for dual use or long-term use by smokers, nor should they ever be used by children, young people or non-smokers. The long-term harms of these devices are still unknown, but we do know that they are not risk-free. Again, looking at the latest health survey data, we can see how device use has changed since 2014, with 2022 being the first year we've seen such a large increase in current use among adults. And this can be seen in other data sources, such as the Scottish level data in the Smoking Toolkit study. And you can see from the study that e-cigarettes are the most favoured version from the toolkit. And both data sets are showing similar prevalence use at around about 10%. All right. Not often that I'm told I'm being too quiet. So I have a 14-year-old son, and this is a topic that often comes up in discussion, or at least I bring this up in discussion. And the story I hear is similar to ones I've heard through engagements with children at Sunnyside Primary and also the Children's Parliament. Vaping rates are increasing, and children themselves are concerned. That is really important. Children themselves are really concerned. The Health Behaviour of School-Aged Children study, which was one of the best sources of evidence we have at the moment, and I'll talk more about this later on, shows that even children as young as 11-year-old are responding that they have tried these devices. Many of these devices, if not the majority, contain nicotine. which is highly addictive. It's something that concerns me both as a policy lead within Scottish Government, but also as a parent. The largest increases in the survey have been seen in young girls. Scotland's new tobacco and vaping framework, which was launched on the 22nd of November, outlines decisive action to remain on track to make the Scotland tobacco-free by 2034. And collaboration has been key to developing the framework. Many people in this room have helped develop it, with stakeholders including Ash Scotland, the Children's Parliament, Smoking Cessation Coordinators, Trading Standards and Public Health Scotland. We also commissioned the Poverty Alliance Scotland to undertake workshops with people who have experience of poverty to influence our refreshed plan. And unlike previous plans, we're taking a more responsive approach to this framework, departing from 5-year reviewed action plans. And instead we have set an overarching framework, which can be seen here, with then work underpinned by shorter, action-focused 2-year implementation periods. And this flexibility is so that we're able to react to an ever-evolving nicotine product range, like we've seen in the rise of nicotine vapour products since the last Tobacco Action Plan was published. We wanted to use this plan to acknowledge that changing product landscape, moving from a Tobacco Action Plan to a tobacco and vaping framework. And this sets the context for the work we are doing. It's our roadmap to 2034. So the tobacco and vaping framework has 3 overarching themes: product, people and place. And I'll highlight some of the key themes and actions within the framework. So people is centred on the actions we can take to prevent uptake, and support and education where we can provide to help people stop smoking. Product focuses on what restrictions can be placed on tobacco and nicotine vapour products to reduce further use or ensure vapes are used appropriately to support cessation. Place looks at the limitations we can place on how and where tobacco and vape products are sold, deterring use of the former and ensuring appropriate use of the latter. These themes are underpinned by 3 key principles: transparency, sustainability and accountability. So transparency focuses on our adherence to Article 5.3 of the World Health Organisation's Framework Convention on Tobacco Control, taking steps to ensure public health policies with respect to tobacco control are protected from the vested interests of the tobacco industry. Sustainability shows the importance of continued funding to support actions in the framework, and accountability prioritises the need for clear governance structures to implement our ambitious framework. And I won't go into too much detail here, as I'll soon give an update on progress since we launched in November. However, it's worth stressing here that under people, there are 3 interlinked strands of work. Around information, there is work to support informed choices, both to adults and young people. We're very aware of the need to return to public health marketing campaigns to support informed choices on vapes, but also importantly, the ability for parents, carers and teachers to also feel empowered to have conversations with the young people in their care. Around engagement, there is an important work that we're doing with our stakeholders, as well as the wider cross-government work that is ongoing. A key component of the framework is that the actions are owned by everyone working in tobacco and vaping, and not solely the domain of government. This is important given the collaborative approach we took to developing the framework. Around cessation, there is the implementation of the work around the important cessation review that published in September, alongside continuing to support the important work of our pharmacies and the Quit Your Way service. And I won't go into detail of the review here, but it's important that this significant work is highlighted. Around product is where a lot of our legislative work lies, and also the work to support the role of enforcement through our trading standards officers in Scotland. Legislation is only effective in this context when it's enforced, and I know my team speak to the body responsible for enforcement in Scotland regularly. Tobacco and vapes are age-restricted products, and retail have a responsibility in the sale and distribution according to the legislation. And I'll go into this area in more detail, so bear with me for a little longer. In terms of place, there are 2 areas we're focusing on in this implementation period, and that is namely a review of current smoke-free spaces, and this includes work around the hospital grounds, and also reviewing how the tobacco and nicotine vaping register could be improved. So it's now 4 months from the launch of the framework, and this is where I want to spend some time talking through what has been happening since the 22nd of November, and it hasn't been a quiet 4 months. but very aware that some of this work might not be visible to the people in the room, and it is laying the foundations of more to come. And I know this is probably the more interesting part of my talk, so thank you for bearing with me so far. So I want to start with our very first action when the framework launched, and it was on the same day. We were so happy to have it. And this is our vaping campaign. The idea for this was that the effects of nicotine addiction could have on children. And as I said, the long-term effects of vaping is not yet clear. These devices, although they've been around for a long time, in their current form are a much more modern device. The prevalence on our high streets and our corner shops means that they're more common than ever. However, it's important that children and young people understand the risk and what this means for them, and to create a way to have a conversation with children and young people, to truly engage with them on this subject. I know all too well the glazed look a teenager can give you when they consider you are lecturing them. I refer to this in my house as the ticker tape that goes behind their eyes. This usually results in an eye roll. So hopefully I can get this to work, and it's a very, very quick video. And this is the video campaign.
Vaping addiction soon takes hold of them. Vapes can contain nicotine and may quickly become harmfully addictive for young people. Get the facts at nhsinform.scot/vaping.
So here you can see the hand pulling them backwards, holding them back, and the campaign is Take Hold. And interestingly, this was seen to be much more effective when we tested this with young people and parents and teachers. The image is powerful, partly I feel because we can relate to the young man in his PE kit, surrounded by vape smoke, which is real smoke but added later. No children were ever exposed to vape smoke, but that actually shows what it could look like. So interestingly, I'd just like to ask the room, how many people have seen the posters? How many people heard the adverts on the radio? Or interacted with the website? Okay. That's actually higher than I was predicting in my head, so that actually has made my day. Thank you very much. The radio advert ran on commercial stations, and the first time I heard it, I was taken back by the disruptive nature of the young person speaking around the puffs in their vapes. It was actually really important to me to hear that, and actually then to hear other parents saying, yeah, I heard that. I'll maybe have that kind of conversation with my child.
Vaping addiction.
So it's important that the imagery was representative of a range of young people in Scotland. This one of a young woman in her school uniform. And there's also a corresponding version of a young boy, primary 5 or 6, in his uniform too. The message that this can affect anyone's child, and unlike smoking rates, which has a strong deprivation link, seems to be across all sectors of society. And I want to reflect quickly on this slide and the fact that it's in Gaelic. I was supporting the Minister at an event with children and young people aged 8 to 25. One of the activities was to design a poster to explain the harms and dangers of vaping. One of the smallest, shyest children sat in the corner and drew a poster in Gaelic. When we went back and asked if we could include other languages to engage people in their native language, this resulted in the wide range of resources for the campaign, which the link we can circulate afterwards. But this also included a BSL version of the video, so it's trying to be as open as possible for people to actually engage. But it was that young child putting her concerns in her own language was so powerful. And feedback has been that it's been a very well received campaign. In January, when we ran our annual pharmacy campaign, the posters are double-sided, so we took the opportunity to include these posters alongside the more traditional cessation posters. And although these were only supposed to be in January, they're still being utilised in pharmacies today, and we hope to be able to re-utilise the resources in future campaigns. So the Tobacco and Nicotine Vapour Register in Scotland is a Scottish-specific register that is governed by legislation. Scottish ministers have a commitment to keep and maintain a register of all sellers of tobacco and vapes. I don't think I'm breaking any confidences to say that the register is not as good as it could be. Even within the current legislation, the technology that runs it is about 10 years old, and it's little more than a web portal and a database that's searchable, but it's an important tool that we have at the moment. And we know that although sellers should deregister if they stop selling after 3 months. This does not always happen. There is no way at the present moment to validate retailer information when they register. And trading standards officials and local authorities find the interface to be hard to use. The framework has a commitment to explore how we can improve the register, what we could include in the future. For example, the conditional register. However, this would most likely require primary legislation and detailed consultation before change could happen. Things take a long time in government. And it wouldn't improve the current register. So we're working with the CivTech programme, which is an IT design programme to run a challenge to redesign the register. And this project launched alongside many other challenges in summer 23, and we're now working on options to build a model of the register which could have more functionality. The solution to the CivTech challenge, as they're called, might not be viable, but we're now much more aware of the power of the register to support enforcement going forward, and hope to be able to come back at a later learning day to tell more about this journey. So it's work in progress, but I hope it gives a little bit of flavour of what we're trying to do with the register. As noted, the hospital grounds legislation was introduced in September 22, and this was the first legislation I'd ever taken through Parliament, and it was amazing to see these signs displayed on our NHS estate. Interestingly, the first signs I saw installed were on holiday in Orkney. There might have been a photo. I was very impressed to actually see them up and running. But as this was introduced in 22, it's now time to review, to learn from the implementation. It's also an opportunity to reflect on the implementation in other countries of similar types of legislation, such as the work that's happening in Wales. So this hasn't started yet, but I'd be very interested to hear the thoughts of people in the room of how we can progress this together through this implementation period to inform our policies going forward. So I'll leave that as a marker for more discussion. So I've said, I've noted before that the harms that tobacco can do, and it kills around 8,000 people each year in Scotland. So that's 8,000 families without a mum, a daughter, a father, a son. These premature deaths are entirely preventable. Most people who are adult smokers wish they had never started, wish they'd never let the nicotine addiction take hold. It's much easier to stop that start. It's much easier to never start smoking tobacco than it is to give up. I know that from my family's experiences. And our framework commits us to working with the UK government and devolved governments and administrations on 4 nation approaches. A great example of this collaborative working is on the UK-wide consultation that proposed creating a tobacco-free generation and further powers to tackle youth vaping. I know that the UK terminology is smoke-free, but our policy is and remains a tobacco-free policy. Our own Children's Parliament consultation report highlights the strong ambition of children in Scotland to live in a tobacco-free, healthier Scotland. So the consultation asked 3 questions in 3 areas: creating the tobacco-free generation, tackling youth vaping and enforcement. And the 4 nations to the consultation was published on the 29th of January, and I would strongly encourage everybody to go and read the responses. And there was a strong response from residents in Scotland, representing 11% of the near 28,000 responses received, which shows the passion in Scotland for this issue. The majority of the responses supported proposals to create a tobacco-free generation, where a child born from the 1st of January 2009 will never legally be able to buy cigarettes from the 1st of January 2027. So I reflect back, that will affect my son, who was born in July 2009. So for me, it's really powerful. And my hope would be that in generations to come, we will have 0 deaths from tobacco. This will be one of those things that generations look back and go, did we really do that? Think about the white-laced makeup from earlier eras. We would never consider that. I want to be clear that these changes are not about restricting the choice of adults. This is about future generations living longer, healthier lives and creating a tobacco-free Scotland by 2034. And I know from conversations with stakeholders that it's important to tackle the way that vapes are promoted. The flavours, colours and the price all appeal to children and young people. Jolly Rancher flavoured vapes are not marketed at my demographic. I have to accept that. The consultation report noted a commitment to develop legislation across the 4 nations to meet the aims of the smoke and, in turn, our tobacco-free generation. And this is an exciting and important opportunity for Scotland to continue the work towards world-leading legislation on smoking as an example to others internationally. And I know you want to know more. And I would be in the same position if I was sitting in the room here. So I'm going to ask politely for a little bit more time and hopefully be able to come and talk more about this in future. So just a little bit longer, please. As part of the work on the consultation, there were questions and proposals to ban single-use vapes. So in Scotland, 82% of respondents supported restrictions on single-use vapes. And that was compared to 79% UK-wide, and 73% favoured an outright ban, compared to 68% in UK-wide. And we're working towards regulation that align as closely as possible, and including a proposed coming into force date of the 1st of April 2025, which actually is not that far away, and is detailed in the draft Scottish regulations being published on the 23rd of February. And this work has been led by our environmental colleagues under the Environmental Protection Act 1990, which is devolved to Scottish ministers, but my team work very closely with colleagues that are leading this legislation. And I'd be remiss not to mention that there are still items outstanding within the 2016 Health Act that have not yet been actioned, and this includes powers to limit free distribution of vapes. And as part of the smoke-free generation consultation, England and Wales consulted on the ability to introduce this legislation, which is already available in Scotland. And in January, we laid commencement regulations that effectively switched on our ability to use these powers. And I know progress on this area is frustrating, and progress can sometimes seem slow in government. But it's important that we get this right, and these restrictions are part of our wider strategic approach to reaching the 2034 target, and are mentioned directly in the framework. And the commencement regulations are a first step in the process. It's another part of legislation process and I know something about. I didn't realise we had commencement legislation. And I hope to be able to talk more about this in tandem with the wider work we're doing soon. So again, I just ask for a little more time and just for you to know that we are working as hard as possible to bring this forward. So I know I've spoken a lot already today, but I want to give you a little bit more information about some of the work that goes on behind the scenes to improve the evidence and data which supports our monitoring of the framework. As noted earlier, we know we have gaps in our data, especially around children and young people. For this reason, we're exploring ways to boost this coverage. And our first step on this is a boost to a current survey of the Ash England Youth Smoking Survey. And our analysts have been working closely with our analysts to pilot this in Scotland. This is only going into the field soon, so it will be later this year if we know if this is a viable data source to monitor trends on a much more frequent basis than through the current 4-year survey cycles or experimental surveys such as the school wellbeing census. So it's just to kind of give you a sense of we know we need to be able to monitor change and monitor direction, so that work is ongoing. And I'd also like to briefly highlight work our analysts have been doing to review the evidence on a range of issues, and I know Serena's here today who can talk more about this in one of the workshops later. But this includes 3 short briefing papers that we know so far about vaping. The vaping health harms paper shows that addiction is an issue, that dual use has health harms, and there is a role for these devices in smoking cessation. The gateway paper shows that there is some evidence that vaping could act as a gateway to smoking, but that more research is needed. And finally, a review of the evidence specifically on vaping and its role in cessation. So it was really just a marker to say that we know the evidence base is evolving continually and we're striving to try to keep up to that. And I know that's the work that our analysts can talk to more, and I'm happy to talk more in the breaks around this. So my time's almost up, but just to highlight that as part of the framework, we have governance as a central tenet to the work that we do. I'm a project manager by heart, so governance is something that I love. My team leader refers to this as our call to action, and I quite like that. It is a call to action. So if you're interested in finding out more about this, then I'm happy to speak about it. We've not formally established the groups at the moment due to all the intense work that's been happening on the UK-wide consultation. But it is next to do on my to-do list, and I even blocked out time in my calendar next week to actually progress this. But if you're interested to find out about the subgroups, about the wider governance groups, then come and speak to me, because we're trying to form those and pull them together to give a wide range of views to help us drive forward the governance of the framework, because it was critical in developing the framework itself, and I want to maintain that and keep up the momentum. So, very brief reflections. We've moved on a lot from the 80s and 90s of my childhood, but the statistics are still stark. One person on average dies every 63 minutes from smoking. This is something we all need to work together on, and I'm so happy to see the number of people that are in the room, all the different experiences and knowledge in the room. And I hope you now understand more about what we're trying to do within government and with the government lens. And we hope to take more work through and to meet the 2034 target. Thank you very much for listening. I know I've sent a lot of information your way, but I'm here for most of the day. Thanks.